Welcome back to Floss Law. Today we're going to talk about auctions, but I'm going to split up auctions into two categories. The first being when you go to a judicial sale or sheriff auction. That we're going to talk about a different day. It's a whole separate category. Today what I want to talk about specifically is auction.com. It's a website that's become incredibly popular and has become probably one of the best sources for finding properties to either invest in or flip in at least the Chicagoland area. I can't speak for other parts of the country. So I want to go over with you what goes on when you bid on a property, register for property through auction.com. I get questions about it. We get contracts in through them constantly. So it's becoming a big source of investor properties right now. So when you go to auction.com, you're going to be able to see on their website, you can search in your specific area and you can set a location that you're interested in investing in. And it'll give you the properties that are coming up. It'll categorize it into the live auctions, where you still have to go to a location, to the sheriff, to the courthouse, to another auction body, whatever that may be. Then there's going to be the properties you can actually bid live on auction.com. You can sit at home, sit in your office, and bid on the property. Let's go over step by step what to do, what not to do, because there are several things you don't want to do. So you're going to locate that property, you're going to register for it. Initially, when you're doing it for the first time, it can be a little frustrating. So you're going to register through auction.com. You have to give them all your name, your information. One thing of note, it's going to ask you for your broker information. If you know someone who's an agent, absolutely always want to put their information down on there. It doesn't really affect anything as far as the bidding process goes, but what it does is when your contract is accepted, it'll either have no agent on there or it'll have an agent on there. Now, I can tell you from experience, you could have a property worth several $100,000, and after the process is over, they decide they're not going to have any agent commission. In that case, whoever you're using isn't going to get anything from part of the transaction. You could have a transaction where you're bidding on a property that's worth $40,000 and they'll give a commission to an agent. So you really don't know based on the price point and what they're going to do. All you can do is put your agent's information on there. You'll need their licensing number and their brokerage information. You're going to put it on there and then wait and see what happens. Next, if you're the first time doing it, they are going to want like a retainer from you. You're going to have to put information in there, put some credit card information in there, and you are going to have to pay to be able to bid on the property. The reason they do that is they want to make sure if you're bidding on the property that you're a serious bidder, and B, you're actually going to go through with actually purchasing the property. So they want you to have skin in the game, so they make sure you're going to perform. It's very important because all of this is for nothing if you're just going to have a bunch of people bidding on a property that they can't buy. Once you've started buying properties through auction.com, they'll take that away, meaning you can go on there, and once they've established that you are a serious investor, that you're going to buy properties through their website, you can register for 100 properties and it will cost you nothing. They'll waive that registration fee. So it's always important that first one you have to get under your belt, pay the registration fee. If you don't buy the property, they don't keep the money. It's only, it's a conditional thing. It's a deposit basically. But they want to know that you're serious. Once they know that you're serious, once you've done some deals with them, then that is taken off the table. You don't have to worry about it anymore. So that's always helpful when you get to that point. You can just register for as many properties as you want. Obviously, you still have to have the money to buy them when you're bidding on these properties. So when the day comes, the auction is going to last for about 3 days. There a lot of times is a period beforehand where they may post how much they're looking to get. If you decide that amount is what you're willing to pay for the property, great. You can contact them, say, I'll give you that amount of money, and they'll take it off the auction if you're willing to do that. A lot of times that price isn't worth doing that. It'll go live for a really low amount, and typically the auctions go for like 3 to 4 days. There'll be almost no bidding the first couple days, and then the last day there will be a few bids, and then obviously the last hour there will be a flurry of bids and activities. What some people can get frustrated with is Auction.com is their service as the provider. It's going to try to get that price up as much as they can. So under their seller instructions, if you think a property is worth $500,000 and the opening bid is $100,000, you think this is the deal of the century, and you bid $100,000, and 10 seconds later, all of a sudden it bids up to $150,000. So you say, okay. So then you put in another bid, and then the next thing you know, it's up to $200,000. You can't figure out what's going on. There could be another investor bidding against you that also thinks it's a fantastic deal. Also could be getting bid up by auction.com because they're under instructions from their seller to move the bid up. So what they want you to do is get you enticed in it, get you bidding on it, get you involved with the property, and then bid the price up and see how far you'll go to get you to what their number is. That's really part of it. Obviously, that's not going to work 100% of the time. People aren't going to bid up to whatever the seller wants for the property. They have a number in their own head, and that's as high as they're willing to go. So then how do they get rid of the properties? Well, a couple different ways. Every single time a property comes up for auction, you need to bid on it. So the first time it'll go up, usually they don't get the price that they want unless it's a really hot property. And then they immediately reschedule for another auction, maybe a week or 2 weeks later. And they'll keep doing that process until they get their number. Or what usually happens most of the time is they lower their number. So no one will be willing to pay X for it. After maybe 6, 7, 8 times around on the auction block, they'll say, okay, we're asking too much money for it, and then they'll lower their price. Now, here's why it's important to bid every single time the property comes up for auction. You can't skip them. Sometimes they don't do that. Sometimes, maybe it's the 6th or 7th time, they'll see that you keep bidding on a property and they will call you. I've had this happen before. This happens. They will call you and say, listen, we're about 30 grand apart from each other. Can you come up just a little bit? And if you can, the deal is yours. And you can either say yay or nay to that. You can say, no, that number that you want me to come up to is still over my max bid. I'm not going to move on it. Or you can say, yes, I'll give you that amount of money. Let's lock it down right now. That does happen, so be prepared. You can't, if you miss a single auction, you can miss a property that you've bid on 8 times, which I've also had happen, because someone else was there at the time when the seller decided, listen, what can we get for it right now to just be done with this process and not do it again? Now, they also could just do nothing and then re-up the auction, and maybe the 8th time, the previous time, the 7th time, the seller only wanted to get $250, and now the 8th time it comes back up, now the seller's willing to take $220, but you don't know that. So it's important, every time it comes up, you're registering for it. Every time it's up, you're bidding on it. If you miss any time, you could miss out on the property. It requires diligence. It's really wearing down the seller, and diligence on your part as the investor to make sure you get that property. So now you've won the bid. Congratulations. He says you have a winning bid. Now what happens? This is where people get frantic because they don't know what the process is. And you're going to get a lot of calls and emails from auction.com. You're going to not know what happens. So initially, auction.com is going to call you immediately and say, congratulations, you won the property. Here's the process. They're going to send you a whole bunch of emails. You're going to get emails, and unfortunately, some of them are going to be a little conflicting with each other as far as what you're supposed to do. Number one, auction.com is going to want their earnest money right away. They're going to be hounding you almost immediately. Whatever their earnest money was for their property, they want it now. Like tomorrow, send the wire right now. Do you need to do that? Yes and no. You need to get the earnest money in as soon as possible. If you're kind of running around, you're busy. I've had people sometimes win a property bidding on their phone while they're traveling and go, oh my God, I just won the property. I'm on a plane. What do I do now? You can buy yourself a little bit of time, give yourself a day here and there, and keep, still have the property and not lose it. But you need to get that earnest money in as soon as possible. They're going to be hounding you until they get that. They're going to send you an email with the contract. It is possible to print it out and sign it and send it back, but they really, really prefer you go through their e-signature process where they can verify your identity, know who you are, and have you do all the e-signatures so that it stays within their system. It makes it easier for them, and they really prefer that you do it that way. It is easier to do it that way, but some people want to have the contract printed out, but they really want you to do it through their e-signature portal. You're going to do that. Here's the thing that people get misunderstand. I get phone calls at least a couple a week. Hey, I got a property on auction.com. And then I say, well, you sort of have a property on auction.com. The reason that is, you won the bid. So you're locked in that you have the rights to this property right now, but you don't have it under contract. Huge difference between those two things. So auction.com is giving you the ability right now to complete the contract. You as the buyer are signing the contract, sending the earnest money in, and typically they're going to want either a proof of funds or something that shows that you have money, have funds available to purchase the property. You're going to put together your packet and send it off, and then the seller has to execute the contract. This is why this is important. I've had some really, really good properties where buyers have gotten it, got the bid, won the bid, signed the contract, sent it off, and then for whatever reason at the last minute the seller decides, you know what, we gave this one away. Why did we do this? We made a mistake here, and they don't sign the contract and they put it back up. I've had that before for a variety of reasons. I think sometimes they go out. A lot of times when you're bidding on auction.com, these properties are going to still be occupied by the homeowner. Remember that too. When you're doing your research on the properties, remember that the property could be occupied at closing. You have to assume that responsibility. Now, a lot of times you can drive by them when the properties have been abandoned. And that's sort of, you're taking advantage a little bit of the miscommunication within the bank network, that they think it's occupied and it's not, and that's your opportunity as an investor. You're doing research, boots on the ground. You can take advantage of that. That's where a lot of this comes into play. Sometimes they'll be up for auction. You'll bid on them. You're getting it really cheap. You see that it's abandoned. You can get in there, do a rehab right away. And the bank will at the same time have sent someone out there to check on the property, see that it's abandoned, and will realize, well, now we can throw it on the market and get a lot more money from it, and we'll pull that out away from you. So this part of the thing, you need to try to get these things under contract, get them locked down as fast as possible when you know you have a really good deal. So it's a little tense in that time period of, it could be a couple days, it could be a couple weeks, where you as the buyer have done everything that you need to do, and you've sent it out, and you need that seller signature back. Because until you have that seller signature back, you really don't have anything. Until you have a signed contract, you don't have any rights to the property that's enforceable, at least. So once you get that seller contract back, that's everything. It's the whole world. That means it's now your property, and you can move forward with it. I've had contracts come back in 2 days. I've had contracts come back in 2 weeks. You really don't know, and there's no way of knowing until you get that contract back. Because you don't know who's on the other end. You know if it's a bank, a seller, investor, or someone who purchased the note and put it up on auction.com. You don't know. So it's a waiting game. Now, let's back up for just a second. When you're completing your contract, you're going to have your name, your LLC information on there. You're going to have your agent information on there. You know, the earnest money, everything's going to be on there. I want you all to do one thing for me. And I just had this the other day with a client, and I realized that was my fault for not talking to them about this beforehand. That was my fault. When you're bidding on a property on auction.com, after you win it, they're going to call you right away. They're going to email you right away, and they're going to ask you for information. Very important. They're going to ask you at some point during the process, do you want to use their title company, or would you as the buyer like to buy your own title insurance? If you take anything away from this, please always buy your own title insurance. The title insurance policy from auction.com is from a national, typically a national title company that's doing really the bare minimum. The title policy isn't going to cover a lot of things. They might not be familiar with local, municipal, county laws. They may not go through the proper steps you need to do to get the closing done on time. There's a lot of things associated with it. I just did a closing in Elgin where the seller was trying to push through, get it done in 30 days. They didn't understand that Elgin has an inspection. They have things that they need to do. You have to get transfer stamps from them. It delayed the closing for 4 months because they just didn't have the ability to get those things done efficiently and get us to the closing table. And it was like pulling teeth to get everything done. Me on the buyer side was really kind of helping them along because they just didn't seem to really know what to do with it. You're not going to get a closer. I've had some where they just send a notary. A notary is not the same thing as a closer. The notary is just someone that's going to come there with a stack of documents, tell you to sign them, verify that you're the name of the person who's supposed to be signing, notarize it, and that's it. You're not reviewing closing costs. They're not representing anything to you. They can't extend any sort of opinion of anything to you. It's just sign it, that's it, and have a nice day. It's a lot of problems with that. The biggest problem I've found is the title policy that you're getting may not cover everything that you need to be covered over. They may not extend you coverage that you need for the property that you're buying. You may not have enough insurance in case something goes wrong with the property, because you have the option of having the policy cover you for what you're buying for or what the property's worth, and they're only giving it for what you're buying it for. So you could be at a loss on that if something goes wrong with the property. Also, I don't want to be too hard on them, but they're willing, because they don't know you, they're not associated with you, are willing to try to extend to you things that won't be waived off title. When you get clear title from, say, me at a closing, I'm going to make sure all the liens are covered off, all the liens have been released on the property or in the process of being released off the property. Everything's been paid for. You're getting clear title. We call it clear title. You're not assuming anything. When you're going through these kind of title companies, they're fine with trying to let it go through that you're going to assume things with the property. Maybe assume a lien, maybe assume something with the municipality. They're going to want you to assume things that are wrong with the property, meaning they're not releasing it. You may not know that when you're at the closing because no one's really helping you along with that. And they're really, again, they're doing the bare minimum. So what you want to do is you want to elect to pick your own title company. By doing that, you can shop around. You can get the best rate that you want. It's not going to be that much more expensive. And you're going to be picking a company that hopefully is local to you. Maybe you have some familiarity with them. When you talk to your attorney is going to have lots of title companies that they work with. I'm sure they'll have a strong recommendation of who they think will do the best job for you. So whatever attorney you're working with, talk to them, say, listen, what title insurance company should we use? Because we're going to pick one for this closing. I can't recommend that enough, that's really going to make a big difference for you, that you're going to have a better quality policy that's going to cover you in case something goes wrong. So moving forward, you have your title company picked. You're working through whatever office that the seller has assigned to represent them in this situation. Sometimes they'll have local counsel, sometimes they won't. Sometimes you're going to have out-of-state counsel, which they really shouldn't be doing, but sometimes they do. A lot of times, even me as the attorney, won't have the ability to work with another counsel. Really, what I'm doing is working through a paralegal under the supervision of counsel, but I'm never going to talk to an attorney on the phone typically with these deals. I'm going to be going through a paralegal and the secretary pretty much the whole time. You're going to submit all the information. They're going to want you to fill out the deed and all that kind of stuff to them. And what you're doing is just getting ready for closing. Usually they'll give you anywhere from like 30 to 45 days to get ready for closing. Typically you're going to be doing a cash purchase, although you can get them done not using cash. It's tough, but it can be done. Auction isn't going to give you any ability to have any kind of mortgage contingency, anything like that, any of the outs. So you can get some type of a loan done on an auction.com property, but you need to know that you're all in. If you don't get the mortgage done, you need to have plan B, because they're not going to give you an out. You just lost all your earnest money. So you can get either a private, obviously you can always get a private mortgage on the property. You have a person loan you the money to buy it, or you can do a hard money loan. A hard money loan is not a bank, it's not a private person, it's an in-between. We're going to do a whole separate video on hard money loans, but know that it's an institution that's willing to do a little bit more aggressive lending based on people who like flip properties, invest in properties, and they understand that there's a lot of value there. You can get those done, but auction.com isn't going to help you facilitate doing any kind of inspection on the property. So you need to have a relationship with your hard money lender where they're going to be able to go in and underwrite that deal without getting interior access to the property. Sometimes you can still get interior access if the house has been abandoned, but you can't bank on that. I've had properties where people tried to do a hard money loan, said the house is wide open, everyone left it empty, let's do a hard money loan right away. The next day, the bank sent someone out to secure the property, and now there's no more access, and auction's not going to give you access. It's important to remember, auction.com rather, it's not going to give you any keys or access to the property till the day of the closing. They're not going to help you with anything. You're not going to get any inspection period, or, appraisal, anything like that. You're going to have to go look at this place and rely on looking through the windows or whatever limited access you can get to the property. But they are not going to help you get in there at all. Not unless they've explicitly told you that they're going to give you access to the property. But unless it says that, I can tell you from experience, if you request access, you're going to get a no almost every single time. So that you're not going to be able to get, even if you have the easiest, best hard money lender in the world to work with, they're not going to give you access to the property. They're just not. So you really have to make sure that you have a plan B of some sort of line of credit, cash, whatever it may be. Line of credits have become extremely popular lately in the investment landscape too, I've noticed. There's a lot of entities out there, a lot of companies offering lines of credit exclusively for this type of investment because they understand the nature of it, that you're not going to be able to get an inspection. So the easiest way around that is they're extending investors larger lines of credit than we've ever seen in the past to pull out to use for this type of investment. Important to note when you're doing this type of thing, whether it is a hard money loan or you're using a line of credit, you're going to be dealing with a very high interest rate loan. So it's not intended for you having the money out for a long period of time. This is a get in, get out scenario. You're going to get in there, you're going to take the money, get into the property, secure it. You always want to secure it. Secure it, and if you're flipping, you want to get that flip done as fast as you can. And if it's maybe a rental property you're going to hold on to, you're going to get in there, clean it up, rent it, and then you're going to immediately want to refi and get more of a conventional commercial loan on that property as fast as possible. We're talking about the difference between maybe a conventional mortgage that might be, commercial is different, keep in mind, but you could be talking about the difference between a commercial loan. I've seen huge investors that I represent get them as low as 3.5. Typically you're going to be dealing more with like maybe a 5.5, 6.5, and you could be talking about the difference between a hard money loan that could have interest accruing anywhere from 12 to 15% interest. That's a huge difference. That is a massive, massive difference in the payments that you're talking about of carrying that property. You need to get out of these properties as fast as possible. This is not meant to be a vehicle for holding them. So just keep that in mind before you start looking in these avenues, and just know when you're shopping around, you might get interest rates that might shock you. That's how much it costs. This kind of money is very volatile. They understand that they could have a huge risk of loss if you screw up as the rehabber on the property. So they carry a high interest rate on them. But the payoff's huge. It's easier to get that money. And the payoff is huge for both them and you as the investor. So that's why they can really afford to charge you that amount of money. The only way you're going to get lower is if you get to the point where you can get conventional financing from a bank, or if you can attract a private investor that's going to give you their own cash for a lower interest rate. For purposes of auction.com, you're going to need to have your cash on hand, a line of credit, or a private investor. You can do a hard money loan, but just be prepared that if you can't get their inspector in the property, it's not going to happen. You're going to prepare for closing. At closing, you're going to really be assuming everything. When you look at the auction.com contract, there's going to be a contract, there's going to be an addendum. It's confusing. I'm the attorney here, and sometimes I get confused because their contract and their addendum directly conflict with each other in multiple paragraphs, and you really don't know who's who or what's what a lot of the time with the closing costs. One paragraph on one thing will say that they're paying for it. Another paragraph in another section will say they're not paying for it when you're talking about all of the closing costs. So sometimes you go into closing really just not knowing what they're going to pay for or not pay for. It becomes a situation where really the bank, it feels like some of the time, is just picking and choosing what they feel like paying or not paying for. They may try to talk you into that you're not paying real estate tax prorations. I've always gotten real estate tax prorations. You're always going to get that. As far as anything else goes, they may try to get out of paying it. A lot of times you can get them to pay for, say, like the transfer taxes and things like that. They may say no, but a lot of times you can get them to pay for it when you're doing the HUD getting ready for closing. As far as any responsibilities, you're assuming 100% of that, though, and that's going to be pretty clear when you read their contract and their addendum. If there's any issues with a village inspection, City of Chicago inspection, anything like that, you're assuming 100% liability for that. They're not going to fix anything. You're going to sign an addendum that says you understand that there's these things wrong with the property, and it's now going to be your responsibility to fix it in order to get the transfer stamps from the village. Depending on what village, city, whatever you're dealing with, they may have their own set of rules too. So they may just take the addendum and say, okay, please get it repaired. They may say, okay, you have 90 days to get it repaired, or we're going to start fining you for it. Or they may say, okay, but we need money up front. We need a bond to ensure that you're going to do the repairs of the property. I haven't had a bond in a while. A lot of the villages were doing the bonds, at least in the Chicagoland area, for a little bit. They seem to have backed off of that because it was really hard for an investor to buy a property, have a village take $10,000 from a bond, and then you have to still do the rehab to the property on top while they're holding your money. Didn't make a lot of sense, so I haven't encountered that lately. But just be aware that things like that are out there where they're going to force you to do the repairs, particularly any village where there's going to be an inspection involved. A lot of villages don't have an inspection, and it's pretty easy if you want to know about that. Just reach out to me. I can give you a list of all the villages that do have an inspection, don't have an inspection. It's important to know that when you're picking properties, that you don't end up saddled up with a property in an area that really is difficult to complete a rehab or a flip in. And we'll do a whole separate section on municipal law later, but just know that when you're identifying properties, take a look at the village and make sure that it's not a difficult place to go. So you're going to go to closing. They're going to give you the packet. All of the things on the settlement statement, like I'm talking about going back and forth on the closing costs, are going to be worked out way ahead of time. So usually you have to get the seller or the bank to approve all of the fees that are on there. So we're going to do that. We're going to submit all the numbers 3-4 days ahead of time. So we'll know going into it well ahead of it what fees are going to approve, what fees are not going to approve, because they're going to approve that final HUD. Not to say that you can't make last minute changes. Sometimes things come up. Things get missed. Like I'm saying, when we're getting the transfer stamp, sometimes little things come up. So you can get it revised, on the day of closing. But generally, it's going to be, you're going to know going in the door what situation we have as far as the closing costs and the fees that you have to bring. You as the buyer then will walk in. We'll go over all the settlement costs together. We're going to go over your title insurance policy, everything that you did, everything that we cleared off title. Seller is not going to provide you a survey. I would recommend you as the buyer buy a survey. If you're doing any type of property, like a single family home, 2-flat, it gets a lot of people don't want to order surveys if at all possible when they're doing apartment buildings because they get more expensive. But I recommend it. I mean, you really want to have it because the seller, again, isn't going to make any representation. So you don't know if there's a problem with the property and you don't want to flip it, go put it back on the market, and then realize you have a major problem where you have to move the garage, or you need to move a fence, or you need to do something serious to the property that you could have done a long time ago, or you could have been doing during the rehab. So when you're buying a property, get a survey. You're going to be paying for it, but it'll be there at the closing, so you can look at it and you can know that if there's any issues with encroachments, any issues with the border for the property. And it's also, if you're going to pull permits on the property, you're going to want to have a survey anyway. So I would recommend just getting that survey ordered too, so you know that you have a good title policy that's covering you for any of those issues. You know exactly what you're getting with the property. After the closing is completed, so you're going to send the money, you're going to sign everything, send it off. I would say half the time, we are able to complete the closing and cut the checks at the closing table. The reason I say that is you as the buyer are going to walk in, we're going to sign all the documents, we're going to send it off. You're still dealing with a bank that's the seller of the property that has to review and sign the HUD now on the closing date. Sometimes we're waiting 3, 4, 5 hours for the bank to get it to the person who has the authority to sign on their behalf, sign it, and send it back so we can complete the closing. So unfortunately, it's one of those situations where everyone shows up, everyone's all excited, we sign our docs, and we wait around a little bit, and then we wait around a little bit more, and then we wait around a little bit more, and we say, well, if you don't have anything else to do, you're welcome to stay, but we've been here for a couple hours now, so why don't you go home? We'll let you know when we get the signature back and everything is completed. Someone can drop you off the keys or whatever. I've had a few where it came back right away. I've had a few where we didn't get it back till like the next day. So, that's always a little anticlimactic when you show up for a closing. Your client's all excited for a property, and really we don't complete the closing. It's frustrating for people, and like I said, anticlimactic really for all the ones that are involved. Once you get the seller signature back on it, then the closing's completed. They can cut the checks. Everyone gets paid, which everyone's always happy about. Keys. Keys can get a little funky. You can have a good company that's been hired by the bank to secure the property that will put a lockbox on there. You can contact them as soon as the closing's over. They'll give you the lockbox code. You can take the key out. Always get the property rekeyed because you don't know who had access to that key in the key box, or you don't know if there were copies. So get a locksmith out there, rekey the property. I've had some companies that were hired to secure the property that when we contacted them after closing, they basically refused to give the code to the lockbox. I recently had one where we went to the the buyer went to the property. I was still at the title company. The buyer went to the property, contacted them, said we completed the closing. Can we have the code to the lockbox? The company said, well, since the closing was completed, we closed out our file. I can't access it, and I can't give you the code to the lockbox. I thought that was a strange one. So client couldn't get a copy, couldn't get into the lockbox. So when the locksmith came, the locksmith drilled the lockbox, used the key to unlock the door, and then rekeyed the whole house. That was kind of a bizarre situation. So you don't know what you expect. A lot of times there is no key, there is no lockbox, there is no key. You'll say, congratulations, you closed on the property. You'll say, okay, where are the keys to the property? And they'll say, well, there are no keys. Because again, a lot of these closings, you're taking possession. So the bank is assuming there's someone in the property, so there's no keys to give you. Like I said, a lot of times the people, whether it's the tenant or the seller, have abandoned it. So it's just sitting there. You just got to go there, have a copy of the deed and your settlement statement to give to the locksmith, have the locksmith show up, drill the lock, replace it, and you own yourself a house. And you want to do that as soon as possible because you want to secure the property. I've had, not personally, but I've heard some horror stories from clients that told me that they did a closing, showed up to the property, and like the day after the closing, just people moved in and said, had a fake lease and said that they lived there. So you want to get in there, change those locks, do whatever you need to do to secure the property so something weird like that doesn't happen. Because if you call the cops on them and they have a lease, even if the lease is fake, if it looks like a lease, the cops aren't going to remove them because they don't know. They can't make that call. So now we have to go through potentially an eviction proceeding on someone who is just basically moved into the property. So get in there, secure it ASAP. Don't waste any time on that. That's pretty much it. That's auction.com in a nutshell, guys. I may have given you a lot of kind of negative information in regards to auction.com. Let me say this. Auction.com is the best source right now, at least in the Chicagoland area. There's a couple other auction houses, and there's like Hudson and Marshall and Williams that seem to get really good properties on the East Coast and the West Coast. They get some here, but not a lot of great ones. And by here, I mean the Chicagoland area. Auction.com consistently gets the best assignments as far as auctioning off properties in Chicagoland. They're the company that you want to go through. So as much as I think sometimes their process is a little squirrely, we put up with it because we get the end result. And really at the end of the day, the end result is we want to have a good property for a really good aggressive price that you as either a buyer or an investor can make a lot of money, make a lot of equity on. So that's why we do it. That's why we go through auction.com. Put a lot of time into investigating properties. You're going to need to put a lot of time into doing your due diligence that you don't overbid on properties, because you really don't want to overbid on a property and get stuck with it. You're going to want to back it out. Imagine how much you'd want to pay for it, and then imagine the worst case scenario that the homeowner or tenant has just absolutely destroyed the property and you need to put everything new in there, and then take out your closing costs, and that's how much you're going to bid on that property. You really need to be safe. I've had people buy properties through auction and walk in and call me crying because they've walked into a condo that they blindly bought and said, I just walked in and it has beautiful cabinets and perfect granite countertops, and the showers have those, rain shower heads up above, and everything looks beautiful, and we don't have to spend, we're basically going to be able to put a coat of paint on here and do nothing, and it's perfect, and we paid a quarter of what it would have been worth on the market. It's crazy. And I've had clients call me and go, we went out there and it had no roof. I've had that where they just said there's literally no roof on the property. There's nothing. There's just rain pouring into the house. So you need to be prepared for both of those extremes. You don't know until you get into that property what you did. So it's kind of exciting. To be honest, for some investors, they really get pumped up getting out there and buying a property and finding out what they have. Do they have one where they're going to have to do a full gut rehab? Or did they find one of those, diamonds in the rough where they just bought something for way under market that they basically don't have to do anything to? You don't know what you're going to get. Or the other extreme is if you're in the state of Chicago and you have a property where you have to forcibly evict someone. That's not fun either. We're going to do a whole nother video dealing with just that, because that's a long topic in and of itself. So I hope you found this helpful. If you have any questions, please comment below. I'll be happy to respond to any of them. Please follow along. There's going to be a lot more videos coming in a lot of different categories. So be prepared. We're going to be busy. We're going to be loading this up. Thank you and have a great day.